Okay, I'd like to address something that is more solidified that I've been thinking about in my mind. As I said, I am, and as my name implies, I'm a relatively new man going his own way. Recently separated from my wife, and the divorce is underway. I've seen a lawyer, and she is supposedly signed the papers today, and that shouldn't be much an issue, fortunately, in my case. Because we have no joint assets, there's really nothing she could get from me. In fact, if anything, I could potentially get something from her, but that's beside the point. Anyway, I at first was struggling with this a bit, going my own way, essentially withdrawing from relationships, pursuing romantic encounters with women. And what I mean by that was not necessarily sex. I mean that at most basic level in terms of conversation. It was almost as if anytime I was out in society and I saw a beautiful woman, I felt an obligation of sorts to attract her, in essence, because that's who I was, right? That's what PUAs do. Again, I wasn't a PUA. I was a seduction artist, if you will, is what I kind of saw myself. I understand how that might sound foolish, but it's what I was doing, and women were a priority to me, the number one priority. Pretty much everything else in my life took a backseat to women. Attracting women, romancing women, and I wasn't about as many women as I could have sex with as much as I was about as many women as I get to fall in love with me. That was almost more the goal than sex was. Sex happened uh, often enough, if you will, but the ultimate goal was to win their heart over. And when you do that, it's kind of like taking out the key pillar at the bottom of the building, and the whole building falls down. Essentially, when you get their heart, it's like then you have the sex that you want, you have the interaction that you want, you have less effort on your end to essentially you don't have to pursue them, and that was not something that I would allow myself to do. But anyway, then again, I was pursuing them, uh, obviously, with what I was saying initially, certainly, and continually, because I wanted to keep them attracted enough to where they were pursuing me continually. Because, as we all know, women and men, of course, too. Let's be fair here. If a woman, um, completely lets herself go, stops shaving her legs or something, that would be unattractive. So, there's maintenance in any relationship, really. I mean, whether it's your friend or your wife or your girlfriend or whoever, there is a certain level of maintenance. But uh, let's put a key distinction here. There's maintenance and then there's addiction. And I think, in fact, I know that I was absolutely addicted to female validation. And I would tell myself that I wasn't. But essentially, what I meant by I wasn't is that if one wasn't validating me, then I would move on to another that would. So essentially, I always had to have validation. It just didn't have to be from any one. And so, there's millions of women out there, so I wouldn't necessarily uh, get completely shipwrecked, so to speak, on just one woman if she rejected me or whatever. If it didn't pan out. Although it would affect me, I would have to use some major coping skills in order to cope with it. I can remember a time where I was dating my neighbor at my apartment, and she was, I'd say, about 6 years younger than me or so, and very attractive. The sex was very enjoyable, and for me at the time anyway. And but she was very immature. And not that any woman is mature for a relationship, but uh, I think you get my point. She was all about partying and that type of thing, and drinking, all the time. And she ended up losing interest in me. I don't know what happened. I guess maybe some other douchebag came along, whatever. I shouldn't say it like that. But anyway, some other guy came along, and I don't know. She just lost interest and moved on. And that affected me. And the thing of was, in order for me to cope with it, was I actually went and stayed with my mom's, even though I was paying for the apartment. I actually went and stayed with my mom's because hearing her, outside of my apartment, because I could hear the hallway that we both used to get to our apartment. She was upstairs, I was down on opposite ends of the floor, so I wasn't directly above her or anything. That probably would have really sucked. But anyway, she would, go up and down the stairs or whatever. She'd be with her friends, maybe even another guy or whatever. I don't know. And so what I did was I went to my mom so that I wouldn't have to hear it, think about it, out of sight, out of mind, right? And so I had to use some major coping skills at times, and that's just one example. But that was one of the probably more extreme examples to cope with that, because I was so addicted to female validation and romancing women and being Casanova, if you will, a modern day Casanova, and here I am now, just withdrawing from all of it. And I must say, at first, because I had spent the last 7 years where every day, essentially, I was focused on women to some extent. Granted, like I said, I was married, so, I kind of had some consistency on that end uh, in terms of validation, I guess you might say. So that was I was pursuing women less, although still in essence pursuing women. It's almost like I needed to attract every single woman in the world. Like that's almost like I think guys can fall into that. And where was I going with that? Anyway, so now I'm single and deciding to go my own way and withdraw. And after several days now, it's kind of becoming comfortable to me. Like I'm feeling okay in my own skin. I'm feeling okay with the decision, and it's a feeling I've had before. And let me share that experience. I was in church in my early 20s, late teens, from about 19 to about 23. I was actually going to be a minister, and I was pretty dedicated to it. So dedicated to the point where I would not date women outside of church, and I also would not essentially check out their bodies, and I'm, in my early 20s, 19, like hormones are going nuts at this time, you know, and nor am I, looking at porn or anything. So essentially I have no sexual outlet. But anyway, I would be around, these women that didn't go to church, and maybe they're wearing tight clothes and that type of thing, and they're I'm sure they're accustomed to men just, checking them out, wanting to pursue them, that type of thing, feeling that energetically, and I was not. I was essentially going my own way with those particular women, and as a result, the funny thing is, and I heard Vincent McDowell say the same thing in essence, and that he said he was at a restaurant and more or less could care less about the women that were there because he was withdrawing from relationships. He didn't want a relationship. He didn't want them. It's essentially the same thing. The women are actually drawn to that. That's the really fucked up thing. Women are actually drawn when you withdraw to you because you're doing something that very, 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 very few men are doing. You're probably one out of at least 100. Probably much greater than that. Maybe one out of 1,000. I don't know. That aren't